I was born and raised in New York City, and I always dreamed of traveling beyond the familiar skyline, beyond the streets I knew by heart. By the time I reached my 20s, I had saved every dollar I could, working long shifts at a diner, watching the travelers come and go with stories in their pockets. My chance finally came when I bought a ticket to Germany. I wanted to see Munich, to stand in a place I had only read about in books. I thought it would be the start of an adventure. I did not know it would become the darkest chapter of my life, a memory carved so deep into me that even today, I still wake at night hearing the clank of prison doors in my dreams. The day I left New York, the airport was crowded and noisy, a chaos of voices and rolling suitcases. I remember the weight of my bag in my hand and the excitement rushing through me. My belongings were modest: clothes, a few books, and a camera I had borrowed from a friend. I was nervous but full of hope, convinced the world was opening up for me. At the check-in counter, a man brushed against me. Just a bump, just a passing moment, and I thought nothing of it. I never saw his face clearly, only his shoulder pushing past mine, his quick retreat into the crowd. That moment, so ordinary and forgettable, would turn out to be the knife that cut my life open. When I landed in Germany, I felt proud of myself. I had crossed the ocean. I had made my dream real. I thought nothing could go wrong. But then at customs, 2 officers stopped me. Their voices were sharp, their eyes flat and cold. They told me to open my bag. My hands trembled as I obeyed, my heart pounding but still certain I had nothing to fear. I expected them to see my dresses, my paperback novels, the little camera wrapped in cloth. Instead, their hands froze on a package wedged between my belongings. Small, tightly wrapped, too deliberate. They sliced it open, and white powder spilled across the table. Drugs! I didn't even know which at the time. My blood ran cold. I shook my head, my words tumbling out, swearing it wasn't mine, and swearing I had never seen it before. They didn't listen. Their eyes told me they had seen this story 100 times before. Handcuffs clamped around my wrists in front of everyone, and I felt my world collapse. The adventure I had dreamed of was over, before it even began. They dragged me away, and I kept telling myself someone would understand, someone would see the truth. But when the doors of that German prison closed behind me, I knew the truth was powerless if no one wanted to hear it. The cell they locked me in was cold and gray, its bed little more than iron bars, with a straw mattress that stank of mildew. The air reeked of damp stone and despair. I had never been so far from home, yet so trapped. At night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the clang of metal doors, the footsteps of guards echoing down the hall, the muffled cries of women swallowed by that place. Unlike many of them, I was innocent, and that made the suffering cut deeper. Every hour that passed, I felt my innocence rotting into silence. The days in prison drained the life from me. Every morning began with boots striking the floors and the grating of keys in locks. Breakfast was stale bread and watery broth, a humiliation disguised as nourishment. We were marched into the yard, heads down, eyes dull. Some of the women around me were hardened criminals, faces set in bitterness. Others carried stories like mine, circumstances they couldn't control. But trust was too dangerous to risk, so most of us stayed silent. I learned to move like a shadow, to keep my head low, to endure. The nights were worse. Darkness pressed in on all sides, filled not with peace but with sobs and screams that clawed through the walls. I clung to memories of New York, streets alive with honking taxis, laughter from corner cafes, the buzz of voices at the diner where I had worked. Those memories began to fade, like photographs, left in the sun, until their colors drained away. My reflection in the shard of metal they called a mirror showed hollow eyes, sallow skin, and hair that had lost its shine. I was vanishing, piece by piece. I wrote letters with shaking hands, begging the American embassy for help. The replies came slowly, written in stiff bureaucratic language. Pending investigation. Procedural requirements. Patience is necessary. Patience. That word mocked me. Patience was a cruel companion when you were caged, when every second felt stolen from the life you should have been living. I counted the days until my trial, praying someone would listen, praying someone would believe me. The trial was even more suffocating than the prison. I was led into the courtroom in chains, the eyes of strangers cutting into me like blades. The prosecutor spoke of me as though I were a calculating smuggler, a greedy young woman chasing quick money. His words shredded me. The judge stared down at me with skepticism. My voice, trembling as I swore my innocence, felt small against the weight of their certainty. They thought I was just another foreigner caught red-handed, lying to save herself. Each day in that courtroom was like drowning while everyone else stood on shore, watching. Time twisted in that nightmare. Seasons passed. My body grew thinner, weaker. My spirit wilted. I stopped counting days because the numbers only mocked me. My voice cracked from repeating the same truth to ears that refused to hear it. I began to wonder if I would die there, if my name would be forever stained by a crime I had never committed. And then Daniel came, my stepbrother. He and I had never been close. Our parents' marriage had bound us under one roof, but our hearts had stayed apart. He had his life. I had mine. But when word of my arrest reached him, he came. He crossed the ocean, and when I saw him standing outside those iron bars, I thought I was imagining him. His eyes carried something I hadn't seen in months. Faith. He told me he believed me. Not a flicker of hesitation. Not a shadow of doubt. Just belief. That belief lit a small flame inside me, a fragile spark that maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. Daniel was relentless. He began piecing together the truth with a stubbornness I hadn't expected. He retraced my steps at JFK Airport. He found witnesses who remembered the man who brushed against me at the counter, a figure who disappeared quickly afterward. He learned that smuggling rings preyed on ordinary travelers, slipping drugs into their bags so the unsuspecting would carry them across borders. I was just one of many victims. Daniel followed the trail with a ferocity that frightened me, because I knew he was risking his own safety. He spoke to lawyers, private investigators, even locals who whispered about the criminal networks that thrived in the shadows. He gathered documents, testimonies, fragments of proof, until they began to form a picture no one could deny. Back in prison, I clung to every word of his progress. Letters smuggled through, brief visits where he updated me, each one a fragile thread pulling me back toward hope. I saw the toll it took on him. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders heavy with exhaustion. But he never wavered. He was determined to prove the truth, and for the first time since my arrest, I believed the truth might have a chance. The final hearing arrived, and by then I was no longer the girl who had stepped so eagerly onto a plane in New York. I was a ghost of her, thin, pale, and worn hollow. I shuffled into the courtroom with chains biting into my wrists, my heart hammering so violently I could hardly breathe. The prosecutor repeated the accusations with venom, his words familiar daggers cutting the last of my strength. I bowed my head, feeling the tide pulling me under again, and then Daniel rose. He presented everything he had gathered, witness statements from the airport, surveillance footage showing the man brushing past me, the confession of a low-level smuggler who admitted to the scheme. Piece by piece, he laid the puzzle on the table until no one could deny what had happened. I had been framed, used as a mule by a network that vanished once the burden was on my shoulders. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in the judge's eyes. Not doubt in me, but doubt in the story painted by the prosecution. The air in the courtroom shifted. When the verdict came innocent, the word echoed through me like thunder. My body broke. I sobbed, my tears pouring faster than I could wipe them away, my chest heaving as though I had been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. The chains that had bound me fell, not just from my wrists but from my soul. Freedom was mine again, fragile, trembling, but mine. Yet even in that moment of triumph, I knew nothing could give back what had been stolen. My time, my trust, my youth, scarred forever by months of wrongful imprisonment. Daniel stood by me as I walked out of that courtroom. I will never forget his eyes. Not pride, not pity, but something deeper, a bond forged in fire. For all the years we had lived apart, in that moment we were bound stronger than ever. He had fought for me when no one else would. He had dragged the truth into the light when the world had tried to bury it. Because of him, I was free. But freedom is not the same as forgetting. That chapter never left me. Even now, decades later, I can close my eyes and hear the clang of prison doors, feel the cold bite of handcuffs, taste the salt of my own tears. I can still see the faces of those who doubted me, the indifference of officials, and the cruelty of strangers. I can recall the emptiness in the eyes of women who wasted away in their cells, guilty or innocent, forgotten all the same. I can remember the guards' harsh voices, the way they slammed doors not just to lock us in, but to remind us we were powerless. Those memories never fade, but neither does the memory of Daniel, his courage, his stubbornness, his faith in me. It burns as brightly today as it did then. He taught me that family is not about closeness or ease, but about standing in the fire when no one else will. He proved that truth, though buried, has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. He showed me that when the world turns its back, one person's determination can change everything. I left Germany scarred, but alive. I returned to New York with a heart forever changed. I never traveled abroad again. The fear cut too deep, the memories too raw. But I lived. I built a life, step by step, carrying the lessons carved into me. I learned that freedom is fragile, that strangers can be cruel, and that loyalty can be the most powerful weapon in the darkest of battles. That is my story. That is how I was wrongfully accused, imprisoned in a foreign land, stripped of everything I knew, and yet reclaimed my name. And that is why, to my dying breath, I will never stop being grateful for the stepbrother who once felt like a stranger, but became my savior.